Welcome to day one of my CRaFTi Advent series. I thought I'd do something a bit different for Advent this year, and I decided to pick out 25 videos that I've done in the past, like a couple of years, and re-edit the old footage to either have a voiceover or some more detailed annotations to go along with it. So this is the first one, and I decided to add a voiceover to this one. This is actually one of my favourite cards. I still have this card on my shelf next to me. Where I used, this was actually the first video, or the first time I actually used any Nuvo products too. This one's from about, well, almost exactly 2 years ago. And I used the Nuvo Gilding Flakes in Radiant Gold, I think they're called, the Nuvo Pure Sheen Glitter in Gold, and 2 lots of Nuvo drops, some of the jewel ones in Key Lime, and the crystal gloss ones in Woodland Green. And the die I'm using that you can see me cutting here is the Cascading Butterflies Spellbinders die by Donna Salazar. And look at me, you can see me using my Cuttlebug. Haven't used her in a video in a while. And if you probably noticed, look, you just saw me do it there. I flipped over my cutting sandwich. If you have a Cuttlebug, the only reason why I upgraded is just because, you know, I do this for my job now, and I wanted a machine that cut better. But if you have a Cuttlebug and you find some dies don't cut quite in the middle properly, if you take your B and C plate sandwich that you use for your cutting and just flip it up the other way when you run it through the machine, it cuts a lot better. I'd kind of forgotten that tip because I haven't used her in a while, but yeah, that's just another tip. So, I've die cut the main butterfly die twice because I'm going to stick one onto the card later, and then I'm going to use the other one over the top to hide any messy parts. And I've kept all those butterflies. I think I still have them in a pot. I don't think I've used them yet, and this is like 2 years ago. But anyway, now I am just adding some double-sided tapes to some extra scraps of white card, and then I'm going to place these over the different butterfly places and die cut them again, because we're going to add stuff to them later, and it's much easier to add the double-sided tape to the butterfly first and then die cut it, rather than using the waste butterflies we already cut and trying to add some sort of double-sided tape to that, or wet glue or whatever. This is a much easier way. And you just saw me there writing on the back of a couple of the butterflies because I wasn't sure how easy it was going to be to double check where everything was going to go. Because all the butterflies are a slightly different size, so I thought if I write on the back of them, I know exactly which one was supposed to go in what space. So that's why I did that. Now I'm just using my favourite, well, it was my favourite back then, I've got a different one now, but my favourite stitched rectangle die, which measures 4 by 5 1/4. Back then that was an MFT one that I got in Blueprints 13 die set, but now I use my CRaFTi Potential rectangles, or there's a dotty one by Avery L that I quite like using, or there's a wonky stitch one by Avery L too. They're all the same size. So any kind of rectangle that you like using, really. And actually, this die would go really nicely on a 5 by 7 card. You don't have to make it onto a smaller card. That's just my favourite size of card to use. So now I'm going to glue down the first die cut outline shape, and this is actually the same bottle of glue I still use now. This is exactly the same fine tip applicator bottle. It's one of the woodware ones, and you can tell how long they last as long as you don't lose that pin, because it's a stainless steel one, so it won't rust. You know, that bottle's going to last you a long time. This is 2 years ago and I still use the same one now. You just keep refilling it with more and more glue. Anyway, oh, and that's still the same acrylic block that I used to weigh things down as well, which is funny. It's really weird watching old footage because you're like, oh, I haven't really changed that much. I still do exactly the same stuff. But anyway, so now I'm going to move on to adding some gilding flakes to a couple of the butterflies. These are ones that I cut with the double-sided tape on top of. I was using a wide roll of double-sided tape, but you can use adhesive sheets too. Nuvo, well, Craft Perfect from Tonic do a really good pack of double-sided sheets, so I'll try and remember to link that below. And these are their Radiant Gold Gilding Flakes. I'm just pushing some of the flakes onto the sticky surface, pressing them down, and then that little black rectangle is called Rub It Scrub It, and it's by Ranger, and it's kind of like a dense foam that has, it's almost like a wire kitchen scourer thing, but it's not very abrasive, it's actually quite soft. And you just use it to burnish over. But you could also use like a stiff bristled stencil brush too. That works really well. And a lot of people say to decant your gilding flakes into a bigger pot, but I find just working from the pot they come in is fine. As long as you're not tipping out a massive amount that you won't be able to get back in. I think it's easier and more space effective to just keep them in their original pot. Okay, so now we're moving on to adding the glitter to another couple of the butterflies. Again, they're the same ones I just die cut. I removed the backing, and then I'm just dumping over some of the glitter and using my fingers to rub it into the adhesive. If you don't like touching glitter, you can use like a backing sheet from like a bigger piece of double-sided adhesive, or you just saw me then. We'll use, yeah, that bit there, that little bit of cloth. That's a little rectangle cut from a Swiffer cloth, you know, like a dry dusting cloth. I think, oh, actually, mine ones are called Pledge, but anyway, it really picks up glitter really well. I used to be more frugal and just cut it into tiny little pieces, but yeah, it picks up any excess glitter you've got on your work surface, or excess glitter off of your glitter die cuts, or even off of your hands as well. So it really helps cleaning up, making it a lot easier. So there I was just placing in the butterflies to work out where I wanted to put them, and you can see me now using the same glue just to stick those ones in place. So when we add the other die cut over the top later, it's not really to make these ones look any neater, because they look pretty neat as they are, because of the way we did it by die cutting it with the adhesive and everything. It gives a nice neat finish anyway. But the next step we do is where we could get messy. So, not that messy, but, you know, we could go out of the lines a little bit. So that's the main reason for adding the one on top at the end. So this is one of my favourite techniques. So obviously this was the first card I ever did it on, because this was the first time I ever used any Nuvo products. But it's flooding an area with the Nuvo drops. You'll notice in the finished pictures at the end that these Nuvo drops did crack quite a lot, and I reckon that is just because of the formulation of the gloss ones and the jewel ones. They dry quite brittle. Not brittle, but like really hard, so if you like whacked on with a hammer it would probably shatter. Whereas some of the other ones, for example the glitter drops, and also the newest drops that have come out, which are the vintage drops, they kind of dry to more of a malleable plastic finish. So if you do this effect with them, you're less likely to get the cracking effect if you don't like that look. But I actually quite like it, I don't mind it. Although I've thought of another way, I haven't tried it yet, but I think if you did the Nuvo drops first and then put over a layer of the Nuvo crystal glaze, I think that would prevent it from cracking too, because it would kind of mix in with it, and that doesn't crack when you put it on a bigger area. So that's another thing you could try. So for this butterfly I wanted a kind of marbled look. I've done this quite recently actually, I'd forgotten that I'd done it in this video. It worked better in the more recent one because the colours were both obviously the vintage drops, so they didn't merge so much, because on this one you can hardly really see the jewel drops in the end, because the woodland green gloss drops kind of overtook it a bit. But anyway, and then for another effect I'm adding down the jewel drops all over the butterfly, and then I've squirted out some of the gloss woodland green drops onto my mat or onto a piece of card or whatever, and I'm picking it up with a pokey tool, and I'm just either swirling it in or dotting it in just to give a cool effect to the butterfly. I think these ones did crack as well. Yeah, looking at the finished card they did kind of crack, but I still think it looks really cool even though you've got the cracked look to it. Kind of gives it that aged look really. So this is a technique that I also love doing, and obviously this was the first card I did it on. and I've done it quite a few times since then, and I often get comments on it like, how do you get the swirls to be so perfect? So this is swirling one colour of Nuvo drop onto the other. Here I'm actually dropping the second colour on top of the first drop of colour, and then using my pokey tool to swirl it in. However, now I do tend to do the drop of the first colour, and then I pick up, the same way I was just doing with that butterfly, I pick it up a little bit of the other colour on the end of my pokey tool and then swirl it on. So there's two different ways of doing it, and I recommend giving both a try just to see if you can master the technique. It doesn't take that much practice really. And anyway, I think it looks good, even if it's not a perfect swirl. I think it still makes a really nice effect on the card. And for this one, I actually I did a few larger ones, and then I did some really tiny drops. I had kind of forgotten that I'd done that before, but it really makes like a cool scattered effect, and especially with this cascading butterfly design, I think it looks really neat when you add them all on. So I've just added on that extra die cut over the top of the butterflies, and then I flipped the panel over and used my scissors to trim off any of the excess that was hanging over the rectangle so that it all looks nice and neat. And now I'm adding on all of those Nuvo drops that I pre-made. You can make them straight onto the card, however if you're not that confident with doing the swirling technique, or maybe you're not that great at making them and you feel like you go wrong more times than you go right with them, you can just pre-make them and leave them to dry and then add them on. I tend to do it both ways really, kind of depends. I like to have them pre-made because often if I'm making like cards for magazines and things, I want to get them posted quickly and I don't want to leave them to dry for a couple of days before I post them. But I do make them straight onto the card too. It just depends what mood I'm in, how much time I've got before I want to post it, or how ahead of the time I am for making a card. So I think that's the end of the card. Oh no, I have to stick it to the card blank, don't I? I can't even remember what I do in my own videos. Yes, so this is an A6 white card blank, and I just used like a burnishing tool to fold it. Now I use the tonic card creaser tool. That didn't exist when I was doing this. But I trim my card blanks down. If you have this sort of like slightly smaller than A2 size rectangle, if you trim a tiny sliver off the width of an A6 card blank and you trim the length down to about 13.5 centimetres, it fits perfectly on it then. That's what I do for all of mine. And I actually have a mark on my guillotine too, so I know exactly where to cut them. So the final step for this card is to add the sentiment. This is like, this stamp set is like, it's got like a really cool typewriter font. It was actually from Tiger, which I think is now called Flying Tiger. And you cut apart all the little tiny rubber stamp letters and you poke them into the little sections on the handles. You've got a straight handle or a curved handle, and then you can stamp them down. I actually keep Happy Birthday in mine because that's like my most used sentiment. And I think I was using Northern Pine Memento ink to stamp that with, and then I'm just sticking it on with a little bit of Cosmic Shimmer glue just so it stays nice and stuck. And when I was doing this card, Tonic had kindly sent me these lovely Nuvo products to use in my cards, so I actually made a pink version too, which, yeah, you can see it here, which has the thank you sentiment, and I sent that to Tonic to say thank you very much for sending me some goodies. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm not sure how great having a voiceover is on my videos, but I thought I would give it a go. It's not going to be a permanent thing, because I'm not that good at doing it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you tomorrow in my day 2 of my CRaFTi Potential Advent series. So thank you for watching. Bye!